different setup than normal, and I'm realizing I got really used to the comforts of our church. There was a screen that normally would tell me if the slideshow was up and if you could see it, but we're gonna just have to have a little bit of faith, I guess, so I'm not like looking, it's not up, okay. But I want you to first just take a look around the room and tell me what you see. So just observe the room around you. What are some things that you see? So you may notice all of the seats are filled up, except for maybe like the less desirable ones towards the front. You may have had to parallel park. Did anyone have to parallel park yet? No one? Okay. Some of you may have to parallel park for the first time since you got your license, which I know is hard. And these seats are like really, really, really close to each other. And for a lot of us, that may be like kind of hard, right? I remember one week I think I'm sitting in the same seat as last time, and that happens to be one of the worst seats ever because people will constantly pass by you because that's kind of like right next to the corner, or you think you have an aisle seat, but then chairs are added in, and suddenly you're in the middle of a row, right? And that leads me to the title of our sermon for today, which is Bad for Now. And I want to start off by saying that everything starts really, really exciting. And I think we've all had that experience before. Anyone here like the first day of school? Like, raise your hand. I guess some people. Okay, I'm not surprised Johan likes the first day of school. That seems to track. But normally, when you first start something, it's really, really exciting. So I spent, back when I was 14, $100 on a guitar that I never learned to play. I spent $120 on highlights that I never toned, so my hair turned orange over time. And it took me starting 5 different times from the age of 15 to 25 to be able to run 20 minutes because I kept quitting over and over and over again. And that leads me to the point that I just mentioned already, that when you're starting something, when you're online on Amazon buying that guitar, it seems like a really great idea and you're really, really happy to do it. But there comes a point after that new exciting feeling goes away. And I don't know if they're going to show the pictures or be able to show the pictures, but who here remembers the groundbreaking ceremony? Does anyone remember? Like, some of you remember. I think some of you guys got a picture with a shovel, and you got to like stand with the shovel. I think Kate got a picture with a shovel, and we were all really, really excited. You know, we're like, okay, we just need to get oh, you got one too. Emmanuel got a picture with a shovel, and okay, here we go. So it was a really, really exciting moment, and we're thinking like, man, in 6 months we're gonna walk in, and 6 months will pass by so fast, right? And it's gonna be great. And that happened to the Israelites as well. They were living in bondage. They were living as slaves. And then they see the power and the promise of God. So they are, rightfully so, really excited about this God that takes them out of this place of bondage, that can part the Red Sea. And we see in Exodus 14, 29 to 31, it says, "But the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall to them on their right and their left." So literally, water becomes a wall to the right and left of them. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So in this moment, you're seeing all the really great things about starting something new. You're seeing the groundbreaking ceremony. You're seeing the blueprints for this new, beautiful building. For them, they're seeing the parting of the Red Sea. And they're seeing their persecutors being persecuted against, right? The Egyptians who were enslaving them are now dead. And in Exodus 15, for 18 verses, they are just singing praises to God. They're saying in verse 1, "Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, 'I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea.'"
Hallelujah.
So in this moment, they're able to see and be so glad to God because of what he has done.
Hallelujah.
But there comes a point where you need to be uncomfortable for growth.
Hallelujah.
And I remember this, the first day of the new year, I came on Sunday, and I'm not gonna lie to you, pretend I was better than I was. I walked in, it was very, very hot, and it was very, very crowded, and I turned around and left. And when I was in my car listening to the sermon, I heard our pastor saying, wow, I love it like this, or I wish our church should be crowded like this every Sunday. Like, I love seeing this, right? And I think it's because he has this foresight that I've always really admired about him, but he's very okay with being uncomfortable. He's very okay with that experience because I think he has that vision. Right? Even when moments when I see the blueprints and I'm like, okay, when is this going to happen? He's like, no, we're going to do this, right? Because he understands that right now, if you're feeling uncomfortable, right now, if you're running and feeling really, really, really tired, that is a sign that you are going to grow. But we see that in Exodus 15:24 it says, and the people grumbled against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? And this is interesting because this is in the same chapter as it started in Exodus 15, 1 through 18, all these praises, all these exhortations saying, God, thank you so much for what you're doing. And then in verse 24, that same chapter, not separated into a new chapter, it says that they were grumbling because they began to feel uncomfortable. Maybe they're like you, maybe they're like squished into the end of an aisle, right? They can't go to the bathroom because the bathroom says it's out of order, even though it's not out of order, apparently. And in an ideal world, right, the people would go to Egypt and they would just transport to the promised land, right? Like, here's my promise, here's my new building, right? You would have everything that you want. But unfortunately, there are times where God calls us to be uncomfortable, where you need to go through that discomfort in order to reach where you need to be. And I think about this especially for those of you here who are in particular Malayali. I know we have a lot of other people from other cultures as well. If you are from another country that's far away, like Australia, maybe you understand this, but there are no direct flights to Kerala. And that has always really, really bothered me because you can't just get on a plane, and if there is a direct flight I don't know about, then let me know. But I remember, like, as a kid, just thinking, oh, this is awful. Like, why do I have to sit first in a 13-hour flight and then a 4-hour flight? And the thing is, the 13-hour flight is not that bad, in my opinion, because you have, like, an okay amount of seat. Have any of you been on the 2-hour or the 4-hour flight that's domestic within India? Have any of you? That is tight. And that flight, because they're expecting you're only going 2 hours. They're not thinking, oh, you just came from a 13-hour flight, although a lot of people are. So, but if you want to get to Kerala, you got to go on that 2-hour flight or the 4-hour flight, right? That is part of the necessary journey. So while I was, not happy about that and like always feeling like, okay, why do I have to do this? I remember complaining to my mom about it, and my mom loves to go back home. She loves to see Kerala. And I remember as a kid, she told me she literally would be fine, like, being in the cargo if she could reach Kerala, right? She's like, oh, who cares, right? Like, I'll go with the luggage, because she knew that the end destination was what mattered to her, right? So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind, that this discomfort we're going through is because we have a promise, because we have something at the end. So I hope that can be a reminder for us. And I was listening to a sermon from Rich Velotis. He is a pastor in New Life Church. And in a recent sermon, he said that he was in his mid-30s when he moved back home with his parents. So he was married, he had children, and he moved back in with his parents. And the reason why was because they were just spending way beyond their means. They did not have enough money to save for what they really needed. And it was uncomfortable for him because people would ask him, he's a pastor of this big church, and they would say, oh, we're in Queens, like, where do you live, right? And he would say, oh, I live with my in-laws, which doesn't sound great when you're over the age of 30. But living at home provided him and his wife with the opportunity to change their finances, save money, and be able to later on have their own home. So he understood that momentary discomfort was necessary for long-term growth.
Hallelujah.
And we see the error of the Israelites in Exodus 16, 2-3. It says, "And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full, for you have brought us into wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger." So they're so hungry, they're so thirsty, that they want to go back to where they came from. They want to go back to the old building, right? Like, at least there we had, AC, we had whatever, and they become ungrateful. But my reminder for you today is, if we look at the next slide, the place that you left is no longer there. It no longer is there for you. So if you want to go back to the church, this is where you'll be sitting. There is no space for you there, right? Because when you took that first step of faith, you had to make room for what God was going to do. So maybe for you that looks like you started a new job and were so excited, but your old job that was maybe a little bit more comfortable, that job is filled. Your apartment that you left has now been rented, and construction has begun. And so there's a couple more photos. I think we've all seen this, but just an idea of what it looks like inside the church. And the next point I want to make is, who you are in the building phase determines your end destination. So who you are sitting here right now in this room is going to determine who you will be at the very end. And we see this in Exodus 32, verse 1. It says, "When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain," so we know Moses is the leader here, and their leader is delaying to come down from the mountain, "the people gathered themselves up to Aaron and said to him, Make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." Hallelujah. And the point I want to make here is there was a delay, right? So do not let a delay in your promise prevent you from receiving what is yours. Do not let a delay in a promise prevent you from receiving what is yours. Hallelujah. These people were willing to take counterfeit gods because they were tired of waiting for their promise. They were willing to go to gods made out of gold rather than the God who, several chapters earlier, we saw literally parted the Red Sea. They accepted false gods because of impatience. And I was watching this YouTuber who, her and her family were looking for some time for a place to live. And they were renting in a really, really nice house. And they basically were forced out of their apartment. The people who were renting to them said, "We can't let you rent here anymore. We're not going to even give you an option. You just have to leave." So she's an online content creator, and her husband were looking for a new home to rent. And they spent a month looking. So a full month just looking, not sure about where they're going to go. And they're hoping maybe if you're moving out in, let's say, February, right? You want to know February 1st where you're going for March, right? You would hope at least with 30 days you'd have some kind of idea. But for them, it would take until the end of the month to get an answer. So in the end, they found a house and learned that the owners had spent a full month just renovating the place that they ended up choosing. And they went to all these other homes, but they would see things that they felt like it was not the place God had in mind for them. Maybe there were idols in the home, or remnants of things that they knew that God didn't want them there. And when she found out that the home that they would be in, the home actually was occupied previously by people who were Christians as well, people who would pray in that same place that they would one day live. Hallelujah. And when she heard this, she realized that her and her husband could not find a home for a full month, and realized that God had closed that door. It was because he was in the midst of preparing something for them. That month that they were looking, can't find anything, they're frustrated, they're upset, God was preparing something for them. And I wonder what happens when God is in the midst of preparing something for us, and maybe it takes a little longer than we imagine, and we decide, I'm just going to go here and rent this other place, right? This isn't that bad, right? Well, you end up missing out on the gift that God has in mind for you. Exodus 32, 7-10 tells us about how the people end up betraying God. It says, and the Lord says to Moses, "Go down, for your people whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way I commanded them." And the Lord said to Moses, "I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, in order that I may make a great nation out of you." But we see in Exodus 32:13-14, that God does relent in his anger. But for a time, and because of what the ancestors had done, the ways that their ancestors had honored God, it says, "Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self and said to them, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of the heavens, and all that land I have promised I will give to their offspring, and they shall inherit it forever." So this reminder of what the ancestors had done, what the promise was at one point. And the Lord relented from the disaster that he had spoken of bringing on his people. But time passes. And I think this next visual kind of explains it well. We're going to fast forward to the end of the 40-year journey. So the Israelites are out in the wilderness for 40 years, and this is a visual of like how long it's happening, right? So we see Exodus and Leviticus, and then the book of Numbers documents that entirely. And now we're going to Deuteronomy 1 to see what happens. And Deuteronomy 1:20-21 says, "And I said to you, you have come to the hill country of the Amorites, which the Lord our God is giving to us. See, the Lord your God has set up the land before you. Go up, take possession, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has told you. Do not be dismayed." So the people are given this command by God to go into this land and take it, right? This should be a very exciting point for them, right? To go and take this new place. And we may have some variation of this in our life, some kind of invitation from God. Maybe he's asking us to give a certain amount to church. Maybe he's asking us to talk to the new person sitting in the same row as us. Maybe he wants you to apply for a new position or a new job. And Deuteronomy 1:26-28, we see that they do not end up doing what we hope that they will do. It says, "Yet you would not go up, but rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. And because you murmured in your tents, and said, because the Lord hated us and brought us into the land of Egypt, to give us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us, where are we going up? Where are we going up? Our brothers have made our hearts melt, saying, the people are greater and taller than me, the cities are great and fortified up to heaven. And besides, we have seen the sons of Anakim there." So on their journey, they're continuing to grumble about the circumstances in front of them, and they are continuing to doubt God and disobey him. So when God tells them to do something, they're looking at their circumstance and deciding, no, I'm not going to do what you want me to do. So in that moment where God wants you to do something, in that uncomfortable place, are we listening, or are we instead grumbling and saying no? Does your response to the troubles in your life reflect your trust in yourself or your trust in God? And I want to comment that this is easier said than done. What happens when you fail that test or you don't get that job that you really, really want? And I have a personal example of this. When I was first applying to become a teacher, I applied for a job at a high school in Queens. And I did work in Queens for some time, but not at this school. This school was really convenient. It was like close by my parents' house. I could take the train there, come back home really easily. And I liked the location of the school. I thought that I could have a positive impact on the student body. And I emailed and I tried to get an interview at the school, and I got one response, and then I was essentially ghosted, meaning no one ever responded to me. And I thought, like, that's not great, right? Like, I wish I had a chance to just even interview there or get my foot in the door, and okay, I'll go to this other school. And that other school ended up being really, really great. It was a great school to work at. And I was not horribly upset or confused in the moment, but I was wondering, why is this door not opening? And I think sometimes we apply for a job, we apply for a permit, or we need something to continue our journey. We're wondering, why is God not opening this door at this time? And years later, I'm an English teacher, so I got a stack of papers to grade. And in the city, the way that it works is by your borough, they basically have different teachers all come. So all the teachers from Queens will come together and we grade papers from other schools in Queens. So I got a stack of papers from the school that I had applied to. And they were asking like, okay, you're gonna grade this. And when the facilitator of the grading saw the name of the school, he made a comment because apparently that school was under like huge problems because they were like doing like very, very like bad things. There was a major scandal, and in particular, it was within the English department. So I realized in that moment that God was protecting me. That God didn't want me to go to that school because I would have been in that department where all those horrible things were happening. And I didn't know it. I didn't know why God was saying no to me in that moment. I didn't know why that delay was happening. But God knew why he was saying no to me. What you think is bad news may not be bad news. And can we trust that God can and will direct us where we need to be despite the roadblocks on the way? Deuteronomy 1:20-21 says, Then I said to you, do not be in dread or afraid of them. The Lord your God who goes before you will himself fight for you, just as he did for you in Egypt before your eyes. And in the wilderness where you have seen how the Lord your God carried you, as a man carries his son, all the way that you went until you came to this place. Yet in spite of this word, you did not believe the Lord your God, who went before you in the way to seek you out in a place to pitch your tents in fire by night and in the cloud by day, to show you by the way that you should go. This is telling us that these people had every reason to trust God, and in the same way, we have every reason to trust God.
Hallelujah.
But there was a penalty for what they did in the uncomfortable place. And Deuteronomy 1:34-36 tells us, And the Lord heard your words and was angered, and he swore, Not one of these men of this evil generation shall see the good land that I swore to give to your fathers, except Caleb and the son of Jephunneh. He shall see it, and to him and all his children I will give the land on which he has trodden, because he has wholly followed the Lord.
Hallelujah.
Their choices in the uncomfortable place meant that they would not be able to enter the promised land. In front of all of us today, we see that we have a promise. We have, as a church collectively, a promise of a new church. And in your own lives, there may be some kind of promise that God is offering to you. And maybe you're on the other side of it and you have that thing that you're waiting for, but maybe you're in the midst of it. And my question for you is, can we trust in God? Can we follow his commands in the uncomfortable place? Can we do it even when we are uncomfortable and just want to leave? May God bless you with these words.